My position on death, my position on this mortality situation is that I am completely opposed to it. That said, I concede there was never really an argument to be made. I get no say in the matter. And die, I will. I think most of us are aware we need to make some friends with death. But let's also admit that doing so is hard. Even if I repeat, there is no life without death, there's no life without death, over and over and over some more, my guess is at the end of the day, I'm still going to feel not that great about my inevitable demise. But the fact remains, death is a grand mystery. It is a great mystery. It is a necessary mystery, and it will be the last physical act of our lives, and we can do it well. And we can do things now that will help us do it well. Even when we're young or youngish and feeling good or feeling goodish, in fact, that is the time to do it. All this came up for me several years ago, about a decade ago, when I was in a period of time called my medical extravaganza. I was getting poked and prodded and MRI'd by a lot of good people who were trying to bring some clarity to a mysterious situation. And all I knew was I was in a lot of physical pain all the time. And at some point, it occurred to me, maybe it doesn't matter what's wrong. I should get ready for the end. I mean, I was in so much pain that it felt like something really had to be wrong. And so I thought to myself, by golly, if I ever feel good again, I am going to get my death prep together. I swear it. And meanwhile, I was helping my father through 14 years of Alzheimer's and his decline and death. And several friends died because that is what happened. Life happens. And it was all merging together. I just did not feel good, and I did not feel like I could really think about this in a compassionate, understanding, calm kind of way. But then it did get better. I was given a reprieve. Turns out that I'm not dying from that mysterious pain, which I am dying, I'm a mere mortal, but I'm not dying from that soon. So I had several years, and I did keep it on the front burner. And I spent several years going around interviewing everyone I could find that would talk to me about death. I talked to nurses, and I talked to doctors, I talked to hospice workers in palliative care, I talked to lawyers, I talked to dying people, I talked to living people who had helped someone through a good death. And I put all these wisdoms into a guidebook for me with the idea that I needed it, and I wanted to share it with other people too. Because I'll tell you one thing, most of us don't even think, what is a good death? What is that for me? What does that look like? And so I went around just asking everyone that, first of all. First of all, I want to say, we aren't getting the death that we say we want. 75% of Americans say they want to die at home, but only a quarter do. 70% say they want low-intensity care at the end of their life, but nearly half receive aggressive care in the last 6 months, which can be very troubling and expensive. And fewer than half of the people say that they have given, quote, much thought to the end of their lives, to which I can only say, what are you thinking? Because it's gonna happen. I believe in listening to all these people that there's 3 major reasons we haven't prepared for it. We haven't prepared for it legally, and that means looking at our medical and financial documents. We haven't prepared for it emotionally, which is making peace with it, which I'll be talking about more later. And we haven't prepared for it strategically, the realities of how it really might go. And I think some people in this regard say, oh, if it gets bad, just take me out in a field and shoot me. But the fact of the matter is that's illegal and immoral, and probably the person isn't going to do it. So we need to own it. We need to own and advocate for ourselves to get to a good death. I think it's important to consider why do we push death away? Why don't we have a better relationship with death? I think there's a couple reasons for that I want to go over quickly. One is our culture today. It's not our fault, but we're very removed from death. We don't live on farms anymore, and there isn't a plague happening all around us. So it's very sterilized and medicalized and pushed away from us with white sheets and that sort of thing. We're just not that familiar with death anymore in this culture. 2, our knowledge about it isn't that great. It kind of depends what you believe, but I feel that there haven't been that many people who went and came back and told us all about it so that we know what to expect. I liken it to discussing sex with a bunch of virgins. Like The idea's out there, but it's lacking in specificity. And those conversations lose their appeal after a little while. 3 is the human ego. I think we're all pretty attached to who we are, and even if we try to separate from ourselves and have some perspective, we're not really that comfortable with letting go of ourselves. And, I like Laura. She's done a lot of work to live on this planet. I like who she is, and I know she likes living at this point in time on this planet Earth, and she kind of wants to stay here. So I'm attached to that idea. 4, I think, is human nature and the way we're wired. We're wired for continuity, and we just have to have some kind of perception of continuity over time. It's just our nature. We expect tomorrow to be a little like today, and often it is. 5, the degree of the unknown. We don't know how it's going to happen. We could choke on a carrot on our way out, or we could get hit by a car, or we could be diagnosed with something. But it's scary when you don't know what's going to happen or when. And finally, I think we have this deeply held superstitious belief that thinking about death might invite death. That if we write a will, it might set into motion a chain of events that makes the reading of that will necessary. So I'm here to say that no, talking about death does not bring death. It is not one of the side effects. So one day, something happens. Something will happen to you. It will be a moment of clarity. It will be the death of a loved one. It will be a scary, close call. It will be a diagnosis. But you will have a moment where you think, oh my God, I really need to think about this. And that is what I went around talking to people to see, how can we do that when we're feeling good? First of all, I think it's important to consider, what does a good death look like? That's going to be different for everyone in this room. But one thing I can say is a good death is one that has been claimed. You get a say in it. That means your medical decisions are respected, which means your loved ones and your doctor are listening to you. Ditto your spiritual beliefs. You are also fully informed. That means people are having honest conversations with you and not lying to you about getting better if you're not going to get better. You're with those of your choosing and not with those of your choosing. You get a say in the matter. You are as comfortable as possible, which means that pain relief might be part of your care, which means you might need an advocate to have somebody helping you with that. And finally, the details that bring comfort. Just like a good cup of coffee or a good night's sleep totally makes your day, I think having the right snuggly blanket or teddy bear from childhood or photo around you can really bring a lot of comfort. If possible, this is a death that can be claimed if we have that choice, but 10% of us will die unexpectedly in a way that we couldn't prepare for. And in that case, I think we have to remember peace is an inside job. It comes from work that we've already done to get us to take that last breath out with our chin up and our heart brave. So I want to talk about how to do that. One of my favorite concepts that I came across in my research, and it was called many things by many different people, but I call it a death mantra. And by that, I mean a series of words or an image that you bring to your consciousness at the very last moment. You take that last breath in and no breath out, if you're able. And it could be the curve of your daughter's smile or your son's eyes. It could be the words peace or love or hello, great mystery, or dang, I've done a good job. It could be any of those things, but the trick is that you've thought about it. What's something at the very last moment that could bring you a lot of peace? The trick, I think, is practicing this before you really need it, because with everything in life, it's practice that gets it ingrained. So I practice my death mantra whenever I get on an airplane. I hate flying. I have to do it pretty often, and I have to get on that, walk down the runway and get on the plane. And so the whole time I'm reciting my death mantra, which both gets me on the airplane, but also reminds me of my greatest joys in life and allows me to practice, what I want to come up naturally later. A friend of mine practices her death mantra whenever she passes roadkill in the road. It's her way of honoring that dead animal, because she's very sensitive to that. But it's also a way of reminding herself that she too, metaphorically, will be an animal on the side of the road someday. And that's just the fact of it, you know? I have another friend who practices her death mantra. She puts it in her sock drawer. Anytime she gets out a pair of socks, she says her death mantra out loud. The idea being that it gets more ingrained in her neural pathways, and so that at that moment when she needs it, she will be able to recall it. So this sounds weird and morbid perhaps, but people are out there practicing their death mantra, and I think you should too. Another great thing I think we can do to bring peace to our death and the death of our loved ones is to talk about it. Talk and prattle and babble and parlay and chat and chat and chat about it. Because the more we keep something inside, the more neurotic and crazy we feel about it. Expressing something is the way that we become more comfortable with an idea. A great way of doing this is the death cafes that are popping up, and I just encourage you to search that and go to a local one. They're at cities all around, or you can host your own. And there's a whole death cafe movement that's kind of spreading across the nation and the world, which delights me. Another thing you can do is what I call an ethical will. This is you writing down who you were, what you stood for, what mattered to you, the basic human that you are. And I suggest that you do this now. I mean, what if you did this now and you updated it every year on your birthday or at Christmas or the New Year's or something? It's a really good way to have a life review and to be able to leave some kind of record of what mattered most to you. Another similar activity you can do is what I call a goodbye letter to life, which is just that. You get to write, "Dear life," and then you can vent, or you can be grateful, you can be curious, you can be all those things, but you get to address your life. So many people I talked to in the course of my research talked about the importance of a good death being reliant upon leaving behind a legacy of who you are. And that doesn't always mean you have a library built in your name. It means that you have some document that that somebody knows who you are and what you stood for. And it's also a chance to review your life, the ups and downs, the bad times, the times you made a mistake, the times you really kicked ass. And that's a really empowering thing too. So to have some kind of overall perspective is really important. Then there's what I call death prep extravaganza activities, which I find really fun. I might be an oddball, but these are things that I enjoy thinking about. For example, I write my obituary every year on my birthday to help get ready for that. And also because I've been asked to write a few people's obit at the last minute, and I didn't know anything about where they were born or who their siblings were and stuff, so leaving behind something is a good idea. But also, I think it's super fun to think about the last words you want to hear, for example. Would it be a poem, a prayer, your kids' names, the names of your favorite cats or locations? So think about if somebody's with you and they could read you some last words, what would you like to hear? Also, what smell would you like around you? I want the smell of sage, which means I need to tell somebody that so they're smart enough to bring in some sage from the foothills. Your favorite music. What kind of music brings you joy and peace and hope? Books or quotes maybe, items or photos. And also, what last taste if you get that choice? It's fun to think about these things. And I thought about it when my father was passing, and I snuck in a little bottle of whiskey and a Q-tip, and I put it just a little on his lips and tongue just because I knew he might get a kick out of that, and I wanted to give him the last good taste of whiskey. So you might think of some of these fun things you can do for yourself or for a loved one. Last but not least, and this is so critical, at some point in time in the very near future, I hope you will get it out of your head where it might be formulating all these ideas and onto the page and in a document that you can hand a loved one who will be in your life for a very long time so that they, and just ask them to keep it safe for you in case something happens. Again, the thing I heard over and over that a bad death or a difficult death or a death that split a family apart was often very related to the amount of communication that had gone on about death. And if people didn't know somebody's wishes, they start arguing and families can be split apart and that sort of thing. Because a few hours now can save a loved one hundreds of hours later, and maybe even a lifetime of heartache and regret if they had to guess what you wanted, and what if they guessed wrong and they spend all this time. So give them a gift of a couple hours of preparation. So few people will do this, actually. We say we want to do it, and we put it off, but 82% of people say it's important to write down their wishes. Only 23% have done it. 80% of people say they want to talk to their doctors about end-of-life care, but only 7% of people have done it. So what if next time you go to your doctor, you make a space for a few extra moments and ask him, can I talk about advance directives? Can I tell you what I want at the end of my life? What kind of medical care? I mean, that's just a really basic thing to get done. Finally, the overriding piece of advice I got from folks I was interviewing was to use death as your advisor on how to live life. If you're aware of your death, it's not a morbid activity. It actually brightens you and keeps you aware of the preciousness of each day. It keeps you away from the trivial and the vain. For example, you spill a cup of tea on your shirt in the morning and your day is going to go be horrible and you're in a bad mood, and you think to yourself, oh, I'm going to die someday. I think the tea is going to matter a lot less. You know, it keeps you in your perspective big. It also helps you give your life priority and meaning, and it helps you make big decisions. If you can imagine your future self on a deathbed, what would the older you want to have happened? So in the end, all I can say is I am a good example of somebody who was terrified of death, and I think I made friends with my greatest fear. It's hard to know for sure, but I think if I walk out of here and get attacked by a mountain lion or a diagnosis of some sort, I think that I will be able to go in a much gentler, relaxed state of mind. I have documents, I'm more or less prepared, my kids know where they are, but more importantly, I've done that internal work to make peace with my mortality. I think it's true that we die the way we live. And so if we can live mindfully, we can die mindfully. And that's what I wish for you. I hope that your life is full and your final journey is held with love and light. Thank you.